play the game, especially in the opening, which rules do you follow in the opening part of the game?
Yeah, if opponent allows me, I play with Vienna game, so that I play uh, F4. Yeah,
You mean something like that, basically.
yeah. So that I can play more with Gambit style. So yeah, I'm getting control of the center, and then I can just push and smash my opponent. This is my goal.
Okay, so basically, if for example, if they take the pawn, for example, you try
Yep.
to take the center with your
Oh,
pawns.
first I put knight because yeah, usually with queen can go here to give me check. I don't want that. So I put the knight here, and then after that I play with here.
Okay, nice.
Okay.
I have one question. Let's think with the black point of view. For example, here, if you think with the black point of view, which move do you think black would play here?
Uh, Something maybe like that.
Okay. Let me show another example about an opening that you don't play, just to talk in
Mm-hmm.
general about position in the opening. So
Mm-hmm.
let's imagine we have an Italian game in which after some moves, white takes the center.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to see this one with the black point of view. So imagine you're black, you're playing this position that is not common, but you
Mm-hmm.
can imagine it. So you're black.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do in this position with black?
Uh, Here. Oh, sorry. Here.
Okay. Why?
Uh, because uh, because yeah, I want I don't like this how to say this bishop.
Okay, so if the bishop was there, do you play this or do you play another move?
If bishop is here, I would play here probably.
Okay. Okay. Let's talk about that. You're right that in this case you have to play d5.
Mm-hmm.
Is because usually when one player has the control of the full center, it's very important for you to undermine the enemy center to make the enemy center less strong.
Mm-hmm.
For this reason, d5 is very important here because you want to remove one pawn because it's
Mm-hmm.
much better to play against only one pawn than maybe
Mm-hmm.
against two pawns together.
Mm-hmm.
But probably, even if the bishop was there, probably it's still fine to play d5 in this position. Because you cannot replay a position which white can always play all the moves on the center. Because it's like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you castle, maybe you could play this or the other. So can force your piece
Yeah.
to go completely back.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
So the logic is you cannot play without the center.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very important. Maybe you can sometimes ignore for the first moves the center, but then you have to fight to take the center
Mm-hmm.
back.
What about this? Is it?
You could play this, but it's a bit more passive, and that means
Uh-huh.
that white can always in the future choose to push or not. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like that for the future you have always white with more options. That's
Okay.
why d5 is
Okay.
more precise. After d5 we reach a position that is a very common topic. We reach the position which he has a central pawn that is
Mm-hmm.
isolated. Usually,
Mm-hmm.
if you look chess books, it's called like isolani,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a topic in which white has more space on the center, but at the same time, this pawn can be a weakness because it's not defended by their pawns. So white has more activity with the pieces, but at the same time, black is more solid.
Mm-hmm.
And if black can trade some pieces at the end, would be nice for black try to attack this pawn in the long term. So in general,
Mm-hmm.
in this position for black it's better to trade pieces to play we can say an endgame. For white should be better to attack to keep the tension.
Mm-hmm. So this isolated pawn, it's a weakness when when no, basically the less pieces I have, the better for me, right? If
Exactly. Which, again, with the topic of the pawn alone on the center. But in this case, we have few pieces. So basically, with few
Mm-hmm.
pieces, this position will be in white favor.
Okay, okay, okay.
Uh, in this particular position, it's not good to take immediately. Because if you take immediately, we'll take back, you take back with the queen, and then black can take this pawn.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But
Imagine, yes, tell me.
it's probably better to play e4 here.
Okay, but try to imagine if you play 4, what black will do after that.
Uh, Maybe we go here.
Exactly, that's a problem. Because the problem is that you
Mm-hmm.
have two attackers, but you have two
Mm-hmm.
defenders. And then you
Mm-hmm.
cannot add another attacker after that. So
Mm-hmm.
very often when you attack a weakness, sometimes it's necessary to block the weakness first and then attack it.
Okay. Ah. Okay, so rook d4, you mean?
Exactly. So first you block, and then you attack. Because after that, then e4 is unstoppable and the pawn will be lost.
Ah, yeah, he cannot go down. Okay, okay, okay,
Exactly.
okay, okay, okay.
It's
Yeah.
it's a small maneuver, very
Mm-hmm.
important because you know that if you reach a position with few pieces, the logic would be I block the pawn, I attack with the pawn that I have on the side, and then I can probably win the pawn at the end, trying
Mm-hmm.
at the end to win the game because I'm up a pawn. So in this position, as we said, if one day I can trade the two knights for the two knights, I can trade the bishop for the bishop. This will be better for
Mm-hmm.
black because at the end I can try to imagine I block the pawn, and then maybe the c pawn in the future can help me to take this pawn one day when I'm ready.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense.
So this move is important for two reasons. Number one, because I need to undermine the enemy center that is very strong. And
Mm-hmm.
number two, because you can reach a position which you can uh, imagine what could be your strategy, and you can have this logic.
Mm-hmm.
I show an example about my experience. I played time ago this position with black. I usually with black. I also play the French. I play the French
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. And in this game, okay, this was my game, and in this case, I decided to trade on d4 because my logic is I trade here, he has to take back,
Mm-hmm.
then I take the pawn on e4. In this
Okay.
way, I reach this position
Ah,
with the
that
isolated
is.
pawn on the center. So my
Mm-hmm.
logic is okay, I trade pawns to reach a structure in which I know the rules to follow, the logic, my priorities, the enemy priorities, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My question is, okay, the pawn cannot be taken because if you take the pawn, you lose because there is a square attack,
Yes.
so it's not
Yes.
possible. But
Yes.
imagine you are black, following the ideas that we said. Which moves can you consider for black in this position?
So maybe block it here on d4
Okay, we said
and
many things before. We said many things because we said that one day you need to block the pawn. But
yes.
for now, the pawn
Mm-hmm.
is. I mean, can't push because it's blocked for now.
Ah, it's already blocked, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
But
So
but
maybe.
we said also other things because if you remember, I told you that in general, when you reach this position for black, for the player that is playing against, the central pawn is better to trade pieces. We can say.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's better to trade pieces, try to imagine.
Ah, okay. So I just trade everything I can, right?
Mm-hmm.
First.
Exactly.
So here maybe, right?
Yeah, it takes.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Hmm. Here it's becoming a little bit maybe
Okay,
here,
this move.
here.
Okay, this move is not so bad, but following the logic to trade more you can was more logical to play bishop b4.
Ah, yeah, exactly. And then he just blocks and I take. Okay.
You
Mm-hmm.
take, he takes with the queen, and probably in order to block the pawn, it's better to go d7 instead to c6, because if you go c6, maybe there is d5, and you
Mm-hmm.
could remove this pawn, but if you play knight d7, d5 is not available, because then you play knight f6.
Ah,
There is this
okay.
intermediate move, and he loses the pawn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this can be a potential example in which at the end, okay, it's not the game is not finished, it's all to play, but
Mm-hmm.
the good thing is that we reached a position with only two minor pieces. His pawn is on the center blocked. Then we can complete our development of playing the bishop on b7. That is good because it's active and also is blocking the pawn. And in the future, your strategy will be to put the rooks on the d file to attack this pawn.
But he also can do this long, and he also has this battery.
Yeah, but so I mean you can follow your strategy in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
So your logic is that at the end, let's imagine, I don't know, we move the king, we continue this way, just as an example.
Mm-hmm.
So let's imagine one day we trade everything.
Uh-huh.
Once we bring all the pieces, it will be very difficult for him to defend this
Ah,
pawn.
okay. And then I just push this when this knight is not here, I push this pawn here, right?
Exactly.
And then I can.
Or
Okay,
or
okay.
maybe you can reinforce the push because you can use the other pawn to then be able to
Mm-hmm.
play e5.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly, when the knight is not here and when yes the pawn
Mm-hmm.
is pinned exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just this about the pawn.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see now something potentially in one of the games that you played in which maybe this strategy could be useful for your play.
A lot of people play this Italian game to me, so it's useful.
Uh, yeah, in this case was another opening was the Slav was the Queen's Gambit declined.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And for example, White played in this game e4, and now it's your move. You played this game with Black. Try to imagine what can you do.
Hmm. Hmm. If we take. Maybe. No. It's not good. Mm-hmm. Maybe attack rook.
Okay.
Don't know why.
Okay. Yes. Okay. It's possible. Then the rook will go away, and then exactly we
Yeah.
have to consider
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
Okay. The point here is that if you want, you can trade the pawns.
But wait a second. Yes, I am trading a pawns and he has this isolated pawn now,
Exactly.
right?
Then exactly.
Yeah.
In this case, you can consider then to play this move to
Mm-hmm.
block the pawn, or even to go back with the bishop to then offer the trade of the knight instead to trade the bishop for the knight. But the important
Mm-hmm.
thing is that you reach the position in which there is the isolated pawn. So
Mm-hmm.
then your strategy can be to block the pawn, trade pieces, and in the long term bring your pieces to attack this pawn. So this
Mm-hmm.
can be. It's the difference between play move by move and play with a strategy related with the pawn structure. If you learn
Mm-hmm.
ideas about the pawn structure, it's easier for you to play because you know if it's good or not trade pieces. You know what's your goal, and the calculation is also easier because you have the goal in your head. So what I mean is that potentially you could trade on e4, and I think trade it's a better option for you in this case.
But some people are preferring to play with isolated pawns. Or
Yeah,
not?
because there are some advantages and some exactly yes. It's not. It's not the end of the world. It depends of the number of the pieces. I should an example. I played with black, and I play like you because usually you play this way when you play black, right? So I played with your same style, I think. Maybe you don't play this, but okay, so we could be always similar. At one point, I played c5, and after castle, I decided to play cd4. It took with the pawn, I took on c4, it took with the bishop. So again, we have the position with the isolated pawn. As you said, it's not bad for white to play this position. Just we have different strategies. So it means that what's good for white in this position? So what do you think is good for white in this position?
Basically, this pawn it takes these two fields.
Exactly. So the pawn on d4 for one end is isolated, so it's a weakness, but at the same time is good because this pawn controls very important squares. And give white better development because the white pieces are more free to play than the black pieces. So white is better about space and about piece activity. Black is better about the structure. The black structure is more solid. So it means that white should play to attack. Black should play to trade pieces because if the pieces are more active for him, if I trade, I stop the enemy play. But this position is equal, so there isn't a player that is better.
Okay.
But
so
if
depending on person.
Exactly, but if you reduce the number of the pieces, in general, this will be in black favor.
Okay. Makes sense, yes.
So, for example, in this case, I played knight c6 to make pressure against the pawn. He played bishop g5. And at one point, as you can see, I offer the trade of the bishop. I offer the trade of the bishop. As we know, for white, it's not good to trade. So he played bishop d2 because clearly, as I know the strategy, my opponent knew the strategy, right? It's not something that I know only me. So he played bishop d2. It's correct because the white plan is don't trade pieces. I played queen c7 because my logic is to reinforce my attack on the pawn on d4. So I want to bring my rook. Rook d8. Knight d5. Bishop f6. Rook c1 because he's trying to make pressure against my queen. I remove my queen. And for example, here, he made a trade because he played knight takes d5. As we know, trade is not usually a good strategy for white, but in this case, his logic is that to attack, white wants to use the bishop. This bishop cannot be played on c2 because there is a knight. And if bishop a2, I can have the knight here. Or if bishop c4, when bishop d3 is played, then I have knight d3. So he trades this knight because after that I have to take with the knight.
Yes.
And then he's free to move the bishop on c2.
Okay.
So it's good and bad at the same time because it's good for him because he's playing a bishop in a very good diagonal. But I'm also happy because I trade one piece, right? So I play knight d7 to defend my castle. He brings the queen because the white strategy should be to attack. For example, now potentially I could trade. But if I trade, I reinforce the enemy pawn on d4.
Yeah.
So that's
But
why.
then this will be weak.
Exactly, it's an option. Yes, it's an option to consider. I thought it was better to trade on e5 first because if he takes with the pawn, then I take here, and there are more weaknesses.
Okay. Yeah.
He took with the rook to avoid that. Knight f6. queen h4 because the white plan is to maybe remove the knight to play for the checkmate. Rook d5 to defend, queen c8 attacking the bishop, and then queen d8. This move is very important, queen c8, because if I play queen d8 directly, there is bishop g5, and if I take, the rook is defended by the bishop. But playing queen c8 first, when I play this, if bishop g5 is played, the rook is not defended. So imagine the sacrifice I can play here.
Yeah.
In the game it traded the rook, queen g3, then I took another pawn, and here I can be also winning because I can attack the rook and the mate at the same time. But okay,
Yeah.
but it's clear from here that once I reduce the number of the pieces, black is going in the right direction, we can say.
Okay.
Clearly, if white is very strong, if white makes very well the attack, would be difficult to defend. It depends by the level of the players. But the two players will play with different strategies. White should attack, black should play more solid. And it depends by the position that we are playing. So potentially, if I have this idea in your game, once you play d4 in your game, you could trade if you want.
Just take. Yeah, just take. Okay, yeah.
This was your game. This was your game that you played d5. It's all okay. Your development is good, and here you play d4, you play knight f8. I don't like it because maybe you could push also e5, so you are a bit restricted with the pieces.
I was thinking about it, but I was thinking that I can just move my this bishop here. Yeah. But yeah, he's strong. I mean, with this.
Yeah, it's not the end of the world, but your pieces are a bit cramped and you don't have much play. Exactly. So in this case, it was more logical to accept the play with the isolated central pawn. Okay, so this was one topic. Isolated central pawn. I think it's clear, right? So this is pawns and the center, but with different situation. Let's imagine now to play this position in which is black to play. This was your game. If you have to choose now what to do, which moves can you consider?
Maybe rook on e8.
Do you remember what did you play in the game?
No, actually.
Okay. If you play rook 8, what's the reason to play rook 8?
To make these two pieces to be like a little bit afraid.
Okay.
To push these two.
Okay. I show what you played in the game. This was a e45 game. Which your opening is good. Then you play d4. Okay, this was...
Then I take this just that. No, it's still. No, yeah, it's still equal, right?
Exactly.
By material.
Yeah. So my question is, what do you think about this push, this trade of the pawns? Yeah, so then is equal exactly.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's not so good when I now see it, because like I exchanging my queen. Maybe I don't want to do it. Maybe it's fine.
Okay, it's not clear, not clear exactly.
Yeah, no, not clear.
Okay, the point is that in this position you have more space because your pawn on e5 it's better than the pawn on d3 for the simple reason that your pawn give you more control of the board than the pawn on d3.
Okay.
So if you have a pawn that give you more space, does it make sense for you to trade this pawn for a pawn that has less space?
No, probably not.
That's one logic. So in general, when you have more space, you don't want to lose your space. And second, in general, when you have more space, you don't want to trade pieces. So you don't want to trade your queens also.
Okay,
So for
okay.
sure, push is wrong. Maybe rook e8 or rook d8 can be also one idea because maybe you can try to one day try to push when maybe the pawn is pinned, for example, to add pressure against the pawn. This could be an idea. But very important to remember that I don't want to push my pawn because I have more space and the trade is not useful for you.
Okay.
So let's write that. So when I have more space, I don't want to trade pieces. And this is a classical mistake in your game. So if you review your games, very often you push the pawn. Sometimes you push and was correct. Sometimes you push and is wrong. It's very important for you to think about that. So you must justify this move. In this case, there isn't a justification. Maybe in other games that you played, there is a justification. Now we can see an example in which your push was correct. No, not this. I think it was this one, yes. For example, in this game that you played with black, you decided to push e4 and the here was correct, for example. Why in this position the push is correct?
He losing castle.
Yeah, but also for another reason. For one end, he loses the castle, but
Yes.
also you weaken the enemy structure.
Yes.
Because now
yes,
the pawn e4 is isolated,
Mm-hmm.
and the two pawns doubled on the c file are isolated.
Okay.
So if you play e4 now, makes sense because yes, you lose your space anyway, but you destroy the enemy structure and you lost the castle, so makes sense. But the important is that when you push the pawn, this push must be justified.
Okay.
If you have no reason to push, just keep your pawn because have space advantage is good. So you can always keep your pawn and maybe improve your pieces if you don't have a good justification for that. Okay, I think it's clear this, right? So we can... Okay, imagine now you have this game. It's another game that you played with white. Is white to play? What can you consider here?
I remember this. Yeah. I remember this. I played this.
Yeah, you played e5 exactly.
But yeah, maybe it's yeah, it doesn't lead to anything, and maybe something like that would be good.
Exactly. So the point is that you don't need to push the pawns too early, because have the two pawns together, it's a good thing for you. So later you can choose if makes sense push or not. Because at the end, black will need to push d5 or e5. So if black, I don't know, let's imagine that one day black will push e5. Then you can choose take, push. You can do what you want, or imagine then they will play d5. You can also consider to push on e5. But the difference is that if you push now, your push is stronger because then the pawn is well defended and it's more difficult for him to attack your pawn. So that's why. So basically, when you have the two pawns together on the center, you have no reason to push the pawns too early.
Yeah, I had this naive thought about like if I do this, then his bishop is like closed. But maybe it's not for a long time, right? He can do something.
Yeah, but basically it doesn't make a big difference because even if the bishop is open, it's blocked by your pawn on e4. So if you had the pawn to d5, the only thing is that he's not free to go to c6, but probably he's not interested to go on c6 with the bishop. So the bishop, yes, is here, but is blocked, and this pawn, it's something that you can defend easily. So it's not a real big problem for you.
Okay. Okay.
So that's very important. Okay, so this was about the center, about pawns, about the isolated pawn on the center. It's something important because when you play the opening, it's very important to remember the principles, and the first principle is to occupy the center with pawns if it's possible. So that's very important. Of the center, because basically when you play with white,
I'm sorry. Can we put it like that?
is it okay?
No. Sorry. Oops.
What happened?
Yeah, like that. Yeah. And here he explained me that I did wrong move.
When?
Now, he, if I remember correctly, what he did. Yeah, and then I played this. But it's not good. He explained me because he pushed. He went for this pawn and he was successfully able to like put
To
it.
fight for the center, and he wins the center at the end. Exactly. But sorry, what should you play instead?
So I know already.
Stopping, stopping the check.
Okay. And then I think, if I remember, I need to play here.
No.
No? Okay, sorry.
Now we have another topic. I just ask you something. Did you hear before about weak squares?
Yes.
Okay. Now I have this position in which white now played bishop b5.
Okay.
And I give you 4 options, and you can choose what you want. The 4 options are: I cover with bishop, I cover with a knight, or I move the rook to d8 or to f8. Maybe try to think like 2 minutes and tell me which move do you think is better for you.
I don't know. I probably would consider this.
Okay. Now I show something else. Let's start by the beginning, okay? So, in the chess game, the best defender is the pawn,
Okay.
because the value of the pawn is, we can say, 1. So if we can defend something with pieces with less value, is better. So if I can defend something with the pawn, in general, it's better than, for example, defend with the queen that has a big value. So I want to be free with the queen to do other things. So, considering this, and considering that I have 8 pawns, it's very important in chess to look at the squares that can be defended by the pawns. So we can say that every square that I can defend with a pawn is like a strong square for you. It's a square that is under your control. So for example here, even if g5 is not defended, it's a square under your control, because when you want, you can easily defend that playing h6. So potentially something that you can always defend easily and is under your control.
Okay.
But as you can understand, when we start the game, there are squares that you cannot defend with pawns. You can defend with pawns the 7th rank and the 8th rank, because the pawns clearly cannot defend these lines. So it's like that the two lines 6 and 5 are strong.
Mm-hmm.
The 7 and 8 are weak.
Okay.
Clearly, it's the same for white because
Mm-hmm.
white can always defend it, but white cannot defend the first and the second.
Okay.
Does it make sense, right?
Yes, 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 makes sense.
That's also why when you study maybe chess, very often they say, "Oh, f7 is the weaker point," right? Because it's a weak square defended only by the king,
Mm-hmm.
or the f2 is the weaker point because it's a weak square defended only by the king.
Okay.
When you play the game, what happened? What happened that if we push the pawns, I don't know, if we push the pawns like in this case, I don't know, if black plays e5 followed by c5,
Mm-hmm.
now the square d6 and the square d5 become two weak squares
Mm-hmm.
because no
Yes.
pawns can defend it.
Yes. Yes.
Clearly, more weaknesses do you have, more you have problems because if you cannot defend the square with a pawn, it means that you have to defend with a knight, with the bishop, with the rook. So as a more cost for you, and
Mm-hmm.
the game becomes more difficult.
So in ideal situation, I want my pawns to be in initial position.
Exactly, especially on the side of your king and on the
Mm-hmm.
center.
Okay.
So
Okay. Okay.
imagine you castle king side. In
Mm-hmm.
general, in this area, or maybe in this area, is better don't have weaknesses. But
Mm-hmm.
clearly, in the other side, which way you attack, maybe even if your weakness is not a problem.
Mm-hmm. 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 Mm-hmm.
So in
Okay.
general, you don't want weaknesses in the side in which you defend.
Mm-hmm.
That is,
Okay.
is usually on your castle and also in the center. Because if you have maybe at the square d5 weak, the enemy knight can be dangerous because the
Mm-hmm.
enemy knight can go to d5.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And as we are understanding now, usually a piece that can exploit well the weak squares is the knight.
Mm-hmm.
Because if the knight will go, if the enemy knight will go here on d5, the enemy knight is quite strong, right? It's very active, difficult
Yeah.
to remove.
Then dangerous.
Yes, can be dangerous, exactly. So this is the point of the topic.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go here and we have to find all the weak squares for black, try to tell me all the squares that you think are weak for black. Okay, clearly, when I ask you the weak squares, I mean 7 and 8 are always weak. So you have to
Mm-hmm.
say if you find other weak squares on the 5th and in the 6th rank.
This probably.
Yes, but try to see more on the black area, right? In the black territory.
The black territory. Uh-huh. Okay. Okay, let me check this. Definitely. This. Ah, but this already
Yeah,
this.
yeah, we know about the
Yeah,
beginning, so
yeah,
it's not a new thing,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There is no weak squares.
Are
Everything is.
squares not defended by pawns and cannot be defended by pawns?
Boom, 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 boom. Wait a second. This can be No, this cannot be defended.
Exactly. So, for example, h6 is a weak square, exactly, following
Yes.
her description.
And then this cannot be defended.
Exactly. So it's a weak square.
And uh, and this cannot be defended.
Exactly. So it's a weak pawn. A pawn inside a weak square will be a weak pawn.
Ah, okay. Okay. And I think that's it.
No, there are other weak squares.
Uh, what about this?
Yeah, this one is weak because no pawns can defend it, and also
Mm-hmm.
h5.
Mm-hmm. Yes, 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 yes.
Then it's clear that you
Okay.
can have many weak squares. Then another job is to understand which one is more important here. So considering all the weak squares that we said, which one feel more important, and you have to pay attention about it?
I think this one,
So which one do you
maybe.
mean?
This
In which there is the pawn, okay. D6.
D6, yes.
Other squares, I don't know, other squares that you feel are important.
This F
F5 because it's
F5.
possible for him to join with the knight exactly.
Yes,
So
yes, yes.
considering
So,
that the square is available for a knight, so as an outpost, it's dangerous for black.
okay, okay, okay.
If you have this information, try to think again about the position, which move you can consider for black.
Hmm. So I don't know. Maybe I just put it here.
Exactly, you have to move the rook. Because it's important for you to be free to stop the knight once when they will go to f5. So the connection is, I know my square is weak, I know it's very important because the enemy knight can join, so I need the bishop. I need the bishop
Okay.
to defend
Yes,
that square.
yes, 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 yes. Okay, yeah.
That's the logic about it. Okay, let's go back now to the game. So the point of the opening is that, okay, black is not so bad, but black has a weak pawn on d6 and a weak square on d5. So it's like that in the future your plan is to fight also for the square d5.
Okay, okay.
Now you can play many moves. There isn't only one move here, but the main logic is this. The main logic is fight for the square d5.
Okay. So basically I want I don't know, maybe this.
Exactly, this move can be logical, exactly.
Okay,
Because you're,
okay,
you're,
okay.
you're playing for the square. Clearly, if it doesn't do anything, you can go 95 and potentially threaten knight c7. So after that, you will play 6. And now you play knight a3.
Ah,
Because
okay.
you're
Then
forced to do that.
he pushes me.
Yeah,
Okay, right.
exactly. And after b5, now you can jump with the knight on d5.
But this knight is isolated now, right? It should go here and then here.
No, usually from here because
Ah, from here? Okay, okay.
c3, c2, e3 because at the end your plan can be always to fight for the squares in which you know the knight can play quite well.
Okay.
So
Okay.
so usually this knight will play from c2 to go on the center. Opening probably, but it's very similar. And now imagine is white to play. Try to imagine what could be a strategy for you in this position.
It's King's Gambit, right?
No, it's always Sicilian, but
No?
maybe another variation. It's always a Sicilian game.
Okay. Maybe I want to remove this defender here and then
Okay.
jump here.
Okay, it's possible, but if you can, it's better to have the knight here then. So if you can bring the knight to d5 and you can keep your knight on d5, this can be a really good strategy for you.
Okay, so first remove defender
Exactly.
and then put bishop here.
Exactly, yeah, so take and then you bring the knight, because now this knight is untouchable. Because he has only the bishop, but the bishop cannot attack the knight.
Okay.
So you have a very strong minor piece that is a knight against this bishop that is quite weak, is quite passive. Let's imagine they go rook c8 and you have to continue your play here for white. How can you proceed here with the white?
Maybe like that.
Why?
I don't want his rook to be here. It
Okay.
somehow scares me. If it's...
Okay.
But I don't know, maybe...
Yeah, it's not so clear because the rook on c4 will attack e4, but it's not so clear if that rook there will be so so dangerous at the hand.
Mm-hmm. Oh, maybe just put it like that.
Let's think in a different way. Let's think always considering the black weaknesses about squares and about pawns. So tell me
Uh-huh.
all the weak squares and the weak pawns that you see in the black position.
This one,
Exactly.
then this one.
Exactly.
Oops. And this.
Exactly.
Yeah. This. Uh, oh, this one maybe, right?
Exactly.
Because
Yes.
it cannot be
And
defended.
the knight of the square of the knight, knight d5. So I mean the square d5 is also weak.
Mm-hmm.
So you know that
Right.
a6 and
Wait a second. Why knight d5 is weak?
no,
Why?
I mean the square is weak. The square is weak for black because black can
Ah,
defend
for
the square
black,
with
for
pawns.
black,
Yeah,
for
yeah,
black.
yeah.
Yes. Okay,
Exactly. No,
okay.
no, I don't mean the knight is weak there. The knight is strong there. Exactly.
Yeah.
Uh, so you know that the pawn d6 is weak and there is an open file in this against it, so it's good. But you
Mm-hmm.
know also the pawn a6 is weak.
Yes.
This can give you an idea about maybe which move you can play to improve your position.
Maybe rook here.
Okay, if you
So.
want to attack the pawn d6 directly, it makes sense to play d6. But imagine, I mean, sorry, rook d1. But imagine you want to make pressure against the a6 pawn. In that case, what can you play?
Uh, just this.
Why?
To defend. To like. Uh,
Yeah, but imagine I play another move like this, just to set an example. And now, how do you
mm-hmm.
proceed?
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I would play something like that.
Yeah, okay, a4. The point is to play a4 because once the pawn is traded, then you open a new line against the pawn.
Yeah.
And so the white plan would be to attack on the queen side, attacking the pawns.
But we can do it already now, right?
Yeah, but maybe not because there is b4. He has a trick. Because if you take, then there is double attack and deals the knight.
Ah,
So at the end your move was useful.
okay, 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 okay.
At the end your move was useful because you block d4 and then you can play a4 in a better way. The good thing here is that black doesn't have a real counterplay, so potentially you can also have time to build your plan and
Mm-hmm.
you can play c3, a4. And the white is very very good here. So the topic is that we have a strong minor piece against a very passive minor piece, and this give you more opportunities to create something concrete.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go back to the
Okay.
game. So basically in the game the logic is this. So the logic is that once there is e5 you play knight b5 to keep this weakness. Because if you play
Mm-hmm.
knight c6 is a mistake because you solve the problem, right?
Yes, 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 yes.
That's
It's
why it's a
very,
mistake.
very strong center he has.
Exactly, that's why it's a mistake. Knight c3, knight f6, bishop e2, bishop b4, take, knight d4, queen d3, d5. Okay, in theory now you have a compound can imagine now for white.
I still want to do this.
Okay, looks logical to just undermine enemy structure, so
Mm-hmm.
it makes sense. Play.
Okay.
What do you do in this case?
Mm-hmm. Mm, maybe here.
Okay. Other options that you can consider?
Yes. Give me a sec. how I can remove it. Ага. Our option I am considering maybe this,
Okay.
but again, maybe I
Yeah,
don't know if it's...
potentially are all playable. Yes, you fight for the center is not the end of the world. But what I mean is that it's here. It's important to see this idea to stop the enemy castle.
Ah, okay, okay.
So
But he can
sometimes,
castle too long way
yeah, but
still.
in the long way it's good for you because in the long way the king is open. So if you castle in the long way, it's good for you
Okay,
because it's
okay.
easier to attack.
Mm-hmm,
So the logic is black should castle king side because on the king
mm-hmm,
side the king is safer.
mm-hmm.
So makes sense to develop and stop the enemy castle because if you castle in the long way, it's much better for you. So if we go back to the game here, okay, c4, it's logical,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see.
but bishop a3 was better to
Something
stop the
like that.
castle
Mm-hmm.
because the point is that you're down a pawn, but you have some dynamic compensation for the reason that you cannot castle.
Mm-hmm. And he cannot do much about it, right?
Maybe knight d6 to stop attack, maybe the pawn.
Mm-hmm.
You can also add the queen to attack the knight, and yes, so you have a good action here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So this was another idea, very nice. So the idea to stop the castle in the game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You played c4. He played castle. That is correct. And now he made. I mean, sorry. After this, you played bishop b2 to attack the pawn.
Mm-hmm.
Is logical. He played the knight c5. Okay, probably should keep the knight here because it's quite strong.
Yeah,
Should
yeah,
use
yeah,
the
yeah,
rook to defend it, and if he plays in this way, it should be better, I think. Because he's up a
Mm-hmm.
pawn, he has a strong center, and this can be enough to say that black is better.
Mm-hmm.
But in the game he played knight c5 that allow you to make some problems with queen e3.
Mm-hmm.
He has to waste time with the knight. And then here he missed rook e8.
Ah. Yeah, but what about this?
Yeah, f4, but then there is f6, and you lose the bishop.
Ah, of course, yes, I had this mistake. Yeah.
Yeah, because you have to see that the queen and the bishop are in the same line,
Mm-hmm.
so after that you lose.
Yeah, exactly. Silly mistake.
Yeah, at the end he didn't see that, so at the end was easier because you found a good play then, and then you won.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe here to say how we can improve, probably you can take, and then try to undermine the enemy center. So in order to do that, what
Mm-hmm.
can you play?
C4.
Yeah, c4 or even f4 in this case.
Mm-hmm.
I think this case is better f4 because after f4 he could push e4,
Mm-hmm.
but this gives your bishop a very nice power, and then the pawn d5 can be your target.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a very nice activity against the enemy center. So again, when he has a strong center, we have to think about moves like this to try to undermine a little bit it. I prefer f4 because after c4 there is d4 and maybe the queen doesn't have really good squares. But after e4 we open that diagonal that is quite strong for white.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. In the game bishop e5, you didn't see that, and at the end you played well. At the end, I don't think there is too much to say. Rook
Mm-hmm.
e1, f4, f5, and you have a good play. His mistake was to play h5. h5 is mistake.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. He already told me about that. He understood it. He said he weakened his king too much.
Exactly.
But he wanted, you know what he wanted?
Yeah, bishop
He
g4.
wanted, yeah, exactly. So that he takes my bishop.
Yeah, imagine you don't see it, he wins because yes, but
Yes.
only if you make a mistake. And the point is that you can easily stop it because you can play queen d3 as you played, or maybe even h3, right? And if you play h3, then he has h5 that he weakened the castle, but no reason because this move is not something that he can play always. It's something that you can play only if you make a mistake, and we should imagine that white doesn't make the mistake, so that's why h5 is an important mistake in terms of strategy. And then you play the well f4 f5, yes, because you see it's easier now for you to attack, because if the pawn was on h7, maybe you can take back easily with the pawn. Now the pawn is on h5, so this gives you more potential for the attack, and at the end, yes, then you played well and you won. But the pawn h5 strategically, it's important at the end of the game. Okay, so let's do a small review about what we said today. Yeah, I think also the game is important because you this point of the center, right? Because when you trade, maybe you don't think about the center and or not too much, right? So it's very important at this point that when you play, you have to fight for the center, try to take the center yourself, and that's also wrong the trade. Then we talked about the topic of the isolated central pawn, that is very important, and the topic about the pawns that when you have a pawn that give you more space, if you push it is only because you have to take something, or maybe keep the pawn where it is. Another point very important was this, in which if we have more space, the central pawns connected in general, it's better for you to keep them.